I'm joined now by the national spokesperson of the BJP, who's also a senior lawyer himself, Nalin Kohli. Thanks, Nalin, very much for being with us. Now, Nalin, with regard to Justice Abdul being appointed the governor, the point which has been raised is that perhaps it's not the best thing for a recently retired Supreme Court judge to accept this position. How would you respond?
I see the argument is an argument of convenience from the Congress party for several reasons. I mean, the first such case of someone who was in the Supreme Court being appointed as a governor goes back to 1951-52, Fazal Ali Saab. I mean, that was right at the beginning of when the democracy really, we had a government, and that was under Prime Minister Nehru. So was there a question of propriety then? What has changed? The principle remains the same, number one. Number two, this kind of an approach or politics that the Congress party is nowadays following is, I mean, they are entitled to follow what they wish, but the fact of the matter is, it's a politics of convenience. Every day, a judge, any judge in a high court or in the Supreme Court is hearing 50 to 60 matters. Now, they rule against the government, they rule in favor of the government, they rule in favor of one entity, another entity loses. I mean, one party is going to lose, one will win. Now, the Congress party now has done something. When they like a judgment, they think the court is independent. When they don't like a judgment, they say the judge is biased. The same thing they do in elections. When they win an election, they think the election commission is wonderful. The election process was great. The minute they lose an election, they start raising questions on the independence of the election commission. They are doing great damage to institution building, if I may say, and in terms of institutional credibility. And Justice Nazeer is a very fine gentleman. I can tell you many of the senior Congress people who are lawyers themselves have appeared before them and probably would vouch for that. That as a judge, he was always fair, heard everything well. He understands the Constitution.
Sure.
He took the oath of the Constitution, as have other judges, and today will be taking the oath of the Constitution as a governor. Either way, who better to understand the constitutional scheme? And what is the business interest that would take place as in the post of a governor? There's no conflict. So I think the Congress party is doing politics when they are unable to do real politics on the ground before the people to win votes.
So the point with Justice Nazeer, the point that the Congress is mentioning, I mean, there have been articles and the like. He's the third judge of the five judges in the Ayodhya bench to be named to a post-retirement job. The argument which is being raised is like it almost seems like a reward for those who've participated or made a judgment in what many would suggest is the most sensitive case in our history, in India's history. Certainly one of them.
Well, why would you call it the most sensitive case in India's history? I mean, there are so many sensitive cases on a daily basis. And Vishnu, as a practicing lawyer, I think every case has sensitivity or has some issue involved in it. So I don't think I would look at it as the most sensitive, but I would certainly put it in one way. That the Ayodhya case was one that had been kept lingering in the court process, and certainly by the Congress party, for a very, very long time. I mean, the Congress party also went on record to say it should not be heard, it will have implications on elections. But after all, it was a case. It had to be determined on the merits of the case. And it had to be determined in terms of land rights and other issues. And the court finally passed a judgment. Now, if someone is part of that bench, somebody had to be part of the bench. I mean, it couldn't have been heard in a vacuum. Now, after Ayodhya, they started attacking demonetization. On the demonetization, again, was he the only judge? Was he the only person who passed it? It was a constitutional bench. That constitutional bench had other judges, their justices have passed their view. Some places you have dissenting, some places you don't have dissenting.
But Nalin,
that's why I said these are arguments of convenience.
But Nalin, what about Arun Jaitley in that case? A very fine lawyer himself, very senior BJP leader, the late Arun Jaitley, he said in 2012, pre-retirement judgments are influenced by post-retirement jobs. So have you forgotten about what he said?
So that was a general comment. Arunji said that. And we, of course, remember that statement. In terms of tribunals, in terms of other things, he was making a wider comment. In terms of judges who have become governors, the case is very, very small. I mean, the basket is very, very small. It's hardly 4 or 5 people. So therefore, this cannot be falling into that category where you look at it from a wider perspective. And I think the case he was building was not on judges as much as he was building in terms of maybe the politics of the day, in which these kind of things fit in well, and that was an apt example.
No, but again, the argument which is raised is that the post of governor it might be constitutional, but it remains deeply political in the context of the job. And we've seen that time and time again. That's what the Congress suggests, that look, this is a deeply political post. It's not like any other post. And therefore, according to them, it's problematic that someone who's just recently been part of the legal system, that to the Supreme Court, should be a part of this political process.
In fact, I thank you, Vishnu, for that question. It's an important question and a very good question. And I think it exposes the Congress party's entire approach to the post of the governor. For them, the post of the governor is a political post. That's why they impose Article 356 again and again throughout the history of the 5 decades that they were in government, repeatedly, for no reason whatsoever. And that's why you required a constitutional bench and a detailed judgment starting with Bombay and then onwards much later. So I think they treat it as a political thing. They treat it as an extension of the political party. The governor's post is not a political post in that sense. It's a constitutional post. And we must understand there's the importance of that post. If there is a breakdown of the constitutional position, if there's a breakdown of the elected government of the day, elected through the process, who finally will be the upholder of the constitution? It is the governor in the state and the honorable president in the center at the national level. So therefore, in a constitutional democracy as such as we are, the elected government or the executive that comes from that is the highest through the vote. But the government runs in the name of the president at the center, and the assent is given by the governor at the state. So it's not a political post. I think the Congress party, through subservient governors and through making it an extension of their politics, made it a political post. And I think when you have someone like Justice Nazeer, a very fine gentleman whom we've seen in court also, is I think a good example of someone who understands the Constitution holding a high constitutional office.
Right.
And just for the record, I would say this as bluntly, lest tomorrow the Congress party puts an allegation on Nalin Kohli that he was speaking well for Justice Nazeer because he has a personal equation. I've never visited his house. He's never visited my house.
Okay.
We've never had a cup of coffee
we
together.
believe you, Nalin.
We've only had the occasion of seeing each other in court. And that respect for him comes from the court. So now the Congress party can't take it to another level by then tomorrow attacking somebody who spoke in his favor.
Okay. All right, Nalin Kohli, thanks very much for joining us.